I think I just felt very trapped for a very long time. And suddenly I was free.
I couldn't stand the thought of living the rest of my life in a predetermined way. I wanted to go out there and explore the world, see it for myself.
When you actually escape society telling you what you have to be, you suddenly realise you have a lot of options. We had no interest in buying into being told what to do by someone else, being expected to be someone. We decided to ride bikes because it gave you a direct connection with the world around you.
You travel along at exactly the right speed. It's not like being in a car going too fast. You get to see the bits between A and B.
If you can ride a bike, you can ride over long distances.
And really, it's just like nipping to the shops, except when you get there, you keep on going.
There's been a fear instilled within us by the expectant world, which is subconsciously resident in our minds, giving us a passive, non-resistant nature. We bow down to the number, tag onto the flock, and one day realize bitterly that our lives are no longer our own. We know our worlds inside out and back to front, comfortable and often happy in the knowledge that if we had taken any sort of a risk, we could well have ended up destitute, outcasts of society.
I don't really think that anyone thought we were actually going to do it, but that was part of the challenge. And, you know, we're Jamie and Ben, we're not adventurers.
6 months before we left for Dover, I was living in a little cottage and Ben moved in with me. Really quickly it became this incredible sort of operations base. We were both working night shifts, day shifts, weekends, just any hour that we possibly could, and trying to save as much money as possible. We'd done almost no training, we didn't have any maps, and really I think we were very ill prepared for the challenge that we'd set ourselves.
In the spring of 2005, cousins Jamie Mackenzie and Ben Wylson left Brook Farm, England on 2 bicycles with the intention of becoming the first to ride on every continent without using aeroplanes. They had a desire to see the world which needed satisfying. Not through a guidebook by way of tourist traps, but through personal, spontaneous experience, through true, off-the-cuff adventure. They wanted to see it all, for themselves.
We can both be incredibly pig-headed. We definitely have been the sort of people to question things.
But I think it was this sort of, this thinking and reasoning which enabled us to actually go off and do the challenge in the first place.
When we were kids, we'd always meet up in the holidays, so we were off out and about building tree houses and damming the streams and that sort of thing. And our journey, Free Wheels East, was really just an extension of that.
People often might reason themselves out of doing it by asking questions about whether it's going to impact on their careers, whether they've saved enough money, or if it was too dangerous. But we just knew that the world was out there and we wanted to throw ourselves into it in a way. everyone has opportunities to make these kind of choices, and this was our choice. This was our time to make that decision.
We decided to catch an early ferry from Dover to Dunkirk in France, and our family came down to the docks to say goodbye.
They were all lined up along the quay, waving. I think quite a few of them were crying as well. It was quite an emotional time, and Ben and I were crying ourselves.
The cousins had made perhaps the biggest decision of their lives, one which would involve leaving England, family, friends, and almost all that was known and stable behind, perhaps forever, to set out on an extraordinary journey into the unknown. They had chosen to ignore the social order and do what they wanted to do.
We planned things very roughly by major cities. We saw that the land between us and Moscow was particularly flat, and it was about 2,000 miles away, so we decided to ride there.
I think by that stage, Ben and I both knew that we were changing the course of our lives forever. And we had this moment where we both had our bikes on the edge of the ramp leading into France. We looked at each other with a sort of uncomprehending look, like what the hell are we actually doing here? We looked down at the wheels and then sort of crashed helmets and wobbled over the line together. Free Wheels East began.
The cousins rode hard for 2 days northeast into Belgium, but lack of training soon caused an injury. Ben's knee had seized up and he was in pain. Stuck in Antwerp, they feared the worst. But after 4 days' rest, a visit to the doctor brought good news. Ben had an inflamed tendon, and provided he took it easy, they could leave right away. Aiming for Berlin, Germany, they journeyed on, high on the road. Miles fell to their wheels. That is, until Ben started to have some mechanical problems.
It would appear that Ben has caught the first flat tyre of the trip so far. We are about 12 kilometres outside of where we left off last night. I've forgotten what the name is, but we're by a petrol station. But Ben is in the middle of changing his tyre for the first time. Let's have a look. There it is. I don't think Ben's very happy about the situation. He's caught the first flat tyre and his legs really hurt him still. He's not happy.
The one thing I really knew how to do was change a puncture, and I expected that I'd have a few. We absolutely dreaded maintenance. We didn't know any of the technical names at all, other than the obvious.
As you can see, Ben has caught another flat. He's not very happy about it. I'm just glad it's not me. But he seems to be getting on quite well with it. Struggling with those red things quite a lot. I'm sure it'll be my turn next time though, so I'm not going to laugh too much.
Ben, how are you feeling about catching another flat?
Not good.
Ben's got another flat tyre. My one's still nice and pumped up and firm.
So that's a problem with the back wheel, isn't it?
I don't know, but I just know it's not my problem. Although we're part of a team, it's always nice that Ben gets the punctures and not me.
Well, we've been cycling long and hard for days and days now into a terrible headwind trying to push us back to England the whole time. But we stopped into Lidl's and bought, well, they say Lidl's over here, and bought 2 fine bottles of Hef Wiesbier for 33 cents each. And we're celebrating here by the sign for Berlin before we enter the city to find my friend Sari's house to have a good night's sleep.
Having reached their first major milestone, Berlin, and having ridden over 500 miles, Ben and Jamie struck out toward Moscow, through Poland.
As we were travelling across Europe, come the end of the day, obviously we needed somewhere to camp, and more often than not we found that the best way to do that was to knock on someone's door. If it was in the middle of the countryside, it was usually a farmhouse. And we'd ask them if they could help us out with a patch of land, and sometimes they would offer us their front garden. Occasionally it was a stable, even a pigsty, and on one occasion it was a children's Wendy house, which was an incredibly uncomfortable night.
Here we have the farmhouse after our 69-mile day.
Sometimes in the evenings when we'd knocked on the doors, people would offer us supper, but more often than not we were just happy with them giving us a patch of land and we'd cook up our own meal.
What are you doing there, Ben?
Just about to check the pasta. There's nothing in it. Have you not put anything in yet?
Not yet.
Each day was a new adventure and the journey went on.
We're just coming up to the Belarus border now, and the roads are terrible. It's just this dirt track going all the way through. It's taken us a lot longer than we thought to get there.
Riding further east, the terrain became forested and the cousins began to live like true nomads. After a long day in the saddle, they would pull off the road onto overgrown tracks to hide out in pine woods, where they lit fires to keep the mosquitoes at bay. Watching flames flicker and sparks pop, life was as simple as that.
Us caveman types have, in our spare time, because we don't have a lot of it, come up with a game called rock balls. Here we've got 3 medium-sized rocks and 1 small rock, which is the jack. This is Jamie's pile. That's a spare one. And these are mine. So here we go. I shall position the jack. Let the game commence. Take up your position, Mackenzie.
Camping night after night, their tents became their homes, and their lives packed neatly into 8 panniers. Neither knew to whom the land on which they stayed belonged, but nobody seemed to mind. People were scarce in those parts. It felt good to be on the bikes, to have them whirring beneath. They rode for weeks and weeks, often for over 100 miles a day. They crossed the European Union, and in early summer, they arrived in Belarus.
This is supper, and we're hoping to improve on it. We're just about to do some fishing. I've got the rods out for the very first time.
Neither Ben nor Jamie had ever fished before.
If this works, if we actually catch anything, it's going to be a miracle. Ben, did you bring the bludgeoning stick?
No. Shall I go and find one? On the quest for a bludgeoning stick. What's this over here? I suppose we could use a brick. Oh, it's a little bit... Aha! A plank! Well, it's not a very manoeuvrable implement. One handleable bludgeoning stick. Jamie! Here are the sticks.
Don't you need to flick this over?
Do it.
Yes, and you hold it.
Pinch it.
Okay, you want to take the tangled... Okay, this goes off, does it? Flick that over.
You ready?
No. Shit! Shit!
You got something?
There was a fish on the end.
No, that's not a fish.
No, it's not. It's sludge. I did have a fish.
No.
And now just reel.
Oh, it's come a long way.
Just reel. No, you've got to break it. You've got to give it some force. Fuckers! How's it going, Ben?
Since we've got it stuck in the tree.
Can you actually see it? Can you see it?
It's miles up, it's right at the top. It's snagged in the bloody tree. How are we going to get that down?
I don't think we will.
Right, here goes. I'm having difficulty, to be honest.
Wiggle it. We only used our rods twice in the entire time that we were away. We lugged them up and down mountains. We had them in our panniers. And all we caught was a log and a tree.
Oh, I want my lure back. Oh.
You realise there's probably absolutely no fish in there anyway.
In Minsk, the strange Belarusian capital, Ben and Jamie took a break. It was to be their last major stop before the push to Moscow. By then, they had become a little more used to life on the road and had fallen into a routine.
And then we entered Russia, and it was all a big shock to the system. We turned up at the crossing, and there was a guard there, it must have been for freight, and he waved us through. And so Ben and I actually ended up entering Russia illegally on that first day, and we found a wood and set up camp straight away so as not to be on the roads. And then the next day when we woke up, we started to look for that road to Moscow.
It was a 4-lane motorway and there was absolutely no hard shoulder.
I don't know how fast they're going, but sometimes they come by, you can feel them brushing your elbows. Cycling along that road into Russia was an unbelievably frightening experience.
I was lucky enough to have a wing mirror on my bike, so I would spend my entire time with my head cranked over to the left looking into this mirror, and I was pretty sure at times that we were going to get squashed, and in those instances I would just scream forward to Jamie.
We've got two shouts. We've got bail, which is abandon everything and get the hell off the road. Doesn't matter what you've got beside you, rocks, divots, dirt, ditch, doesn't matter. You get off the road. And the other one is brace. So you've got to maintain a straight heading and brace yourself up. And yesterday my nerves just about broke. Twice in about a minute the word brace came and then the word bail came. And it kind of shook me up quite a lot. You can't honestly imagine how that felt, to think that you might be snuffed out at any moment.
There were times when both Jamie and Ben seriously questioned the point of riding bikes on roads like that. Freewheels East was about exploration and was not something to be done for the sake of it, to seem fearless or to impress others.
Home was really seeming like an awfully long way away by then. We missed our friends and family. We'd talked about them quite a lot, mostly in the evenings when we were camping. Cycling across Europe had become very monotonous and boring. It was very flat. And we wanted something to challenge us. I think we just wanted a new challenge. And the best way we thought of achieving that was to get to Moscow and then possibly take the Trans-Siberian Railway to Beijing, because from there we wanted to cycle all the way to Singapore.
The Russian people really weren't that liberal with their emotions, and over time it was beginning to get quite oppressive, I think. And also, it was the stress of coming so close to death every day that was putting a lot of pressure on us.
But there was one really positive thing for us to head towards, And that was that Ben's brother Jack was set to meet us when we got to Moscow. I think he was on his university summer holiday and was set to spend his student loan.
I suppose I was pretty apprehensive because I'd never done anything like this before. I was unfit and I was worried about slowing them down, but it was also really exciting because I was about to join in.
Having Jack come out to join us on the trip was going to give everything a beautiful injection of life. It had all got very stale, and I was really looking forward to seeing him.
Getting to Moscow gave us a huge belief in our ability, and I think we both suddenly realised that if we put our minds to it, we could probably achieve anything we wanted to.
That feeling of achievement was immense, because for the first time we were beginning to feel like pioneers. I mean, we'd never actually met anyone who'd cycled to Moscow before.
Well, we've made it to Red Square, which is quite unbelievable. We've cycled to Moscow from Dunkirk in France.
As planned, Jack joined the team in Moscow. It was so good to see him. He had been missed. By then, Jamie and Ben had ridden over 2,000 miles, and with their new objective, to ride in their second continent, Asia, they boarded the Trans-Siberian Railway at Yaroslavska Station, Moscow, and began that gargantuan train journey into the Far East. The carriage was cramped, with the bikes taking up almost all of their living space. After 118 hours on the tracks and having crossed 5 time zones, they stopped off in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. They took a jeep into the heart of the Gobi Desert. All the familiarities of Europe were long gone now. Approaching Beijing, China, with legs well rested and bodies refreshed, they were ready to begin the next leg of cycling and were eager to get back into their saddles. Jack had bought himself a bicycle at a Beijing market. It had a basket on the handlebars, and on the back were his possessions, rolled up in a foam sleeping mat and bungeed to the frame. He intended to ride with Freewheels East for 700 miles to the city of Xi'an. But on the first day's riding south of Beijing, the mountains took their toll and Jack's chain snapped. Jamie did some on-the-spot repairs. He removed the broken links and reconnected the chain, but the shortening caused all but 3 of Jack's gears to be lost, and the constant clanking sound that resulted was never fixed. The elation of being back on the road was huge, despite the difficulties with Jack's bike, and the exhaustingly mountainous terrain only made the massive downhills even better.
La 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 la.
We were just trying to fix a problem with Jack's bike. We wanted to make his back end a bit more secure, a bit more weatherproof, and suddenly a few people turned up, and they're all over the place, the whole village.
I'd never actually flown out of Europe before, and suddenly I was in deepest China on a push bike.
riding in close formation was more dangerous with an extra person on the team.
So I caused an accident. The thing was, Ben and Jamie were used to riding in really close formation, and when there was a third person, their dynamic didn't work so well. I sort of upset the balance.
Poor old Ben came absolutely flying down the hill. Jack was right in front of him. I think what happened was the bag jumped out of the front of his basket and he braked hard so he wouldn't run over it. Ben went flying into the back of him. I think as long as it's a lesson learned, cycling in flip-flops perhaps isn't such a hot idea. Maybe cycling with helmets is.
We ended up having another accident, and this time Jamie was at the back and he ended up losing his little fingernail. The locals were really friendly. They would always invite us in and give us food and water. Our main problem actually was just navigation. How do we get from one place to the other? And not speaking any Mandarin didn't really help.
Excuse me. Can I show you the map? Yanquan. It's Yanquan. Yanquan. This way. Yanquan. This way. Yanquan. 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 This way. Yanquan. Yanquan. Is it this way? Yes. Yes. Ah, good. Xi'an Renkan. Xi'an Renkan.
听不懂，那么听不懂。哎呀，你这。
Yanquan. Slightly lost, but I think we're back on track now. We found Yanquan, or the road to Yanquan.
It's just been an unbelievably tiring day today. When we woke up this morning, we climbed up a mountain of over 1,000 meters. And then Jack's chain started playing up again. We haven't got a clue why whatsoever. But then Jack got a puncture just when we were leaving on the final push into this city that we're aiming for tonight. And we wheeled it back to this town. I haven't got a clue what the name is, but they're trying to fix it for us.
Road seems to have turned particularly bad. We took a bit of a shortcut, and it hasn't really worked out in our favour. It's very dusty.
That part between Beijing and Xi'an was a total nightmare. The road was very potted. Cycling along it, just holding onto the handlebars alone was enough to jar your wrists. You had blisters all over you as well. It was a very painful experience.
The indomitable team went on to hit heavy industry northeast of Xi'an. It was no place for men on bikes. This was an unwelcome surprise. Their philosophy of pointing the handlebars in any direction to see what happens wasn't so much fun now.
The pollution also was very, very bad. We were cycling through a mining district. Literally in the mornings you'd have a shower, you'd get on the road, and after 10 minutes you'd be covered from head to foot in soot.
I can safely say this is one of the most vile places I've ever been in my life. Yeah. Absolutely horrible. We are covered in soot and trucks that keep passing us on the road. There's no let up, you can't see anything up ahead because it's so foggy, so misty, so polluted. Anyway, roll on this ending. I agree.
After days of riding the dustiest, dirtiest, most challenging road seen so far, they were deafened by the constant truck horns. Eyes were blinded by coal grit, and skin was caked in grime. They were exhausted.
He's leaving. We don't want him to go.
I rode with them for 2 weeks and we crossed massive mountains, and it was exhausting, but it was really rewarding as well, and I felt fitter by the end of that than I'd ever felt in my life. When I came to leave, I actually really envied them because I was going back to my life in England and they were carrying on this incredible adventure, and they were only part way through. But at the same time I was worried about them because we'd been through so many scrapes that I just thought it's almost impossible for them to get all the way to Singapore unscathed.
Arrival in Xi'an marked Jack's departure. He was already a few weeks late to begin his second year at university. Ben and Jamie were saddened by his leaving. He was their last connection with home, and they both felt incredibly alone. By now they were deep into the adventure, perhaps too deep. At some point they would have to go to Australasia, the Americas, Africa, and even Antarctica. How would they cross the seas without planes? Where would they find a ship? The impossibility of it all weighed heavy.
We've just been cycling for about 20 miles now, dirt roads, and we've done this huge climb. It's just about killing us. We're in first gear, and just about every other turn of the revolution of the pedals, you're wheel spinning. So it's really quite difficult, but it's worth it. This view is just unbelievable.
I honestly don't think that either of us could see ourselves finishing the trip at that point.
We had a radical change of plans. We thought, let's get out of here. So we went northwest to a city called Lanzhou.
It was probably one of the best decisions we made on the entire trip. We stumbled across this place called the Aber Grasslands, and they were very magical and beautiful.
So the Tibetan Plateau was over in the west, and the flatlands of China are in the east. And obviously the flat has to step up to the plateau, and that's where the mountains are. And that's where we were cycling.
Jamie's being attacked by bees.
I had a bee stuck in my hair. We've just gone through an absolute swarm of them, thousands. But we've been cycling all morning. We've done about 20, no, we've only done 15 miles. There's still loads of bees. But we climbed and climbed and climbed up to an altitude of over 3,000 metres. The first time we've actually cycled over 3,000 metres. Look. Hello, lots of bees. Get you. You go this way to Singapore. London. Yeah? And we go to Singapore. Singapore. Is it downhill to Singapore? Downhill? Or uphill? Down? Up!
As we continued further south, we came to a river that was called the Dedu, and we followed that downstream for about 2 weeks.
Sichuan province, just east of the Himalaya. The wet season. It's a dangerous place. Landslides, falling rocks, road collapses, and river crossings are constant hazards.
Landslides then put us in a bit of a predicament. We could either cycle back up the road we'd just come down, which would take us about 2 weeks to do, or we could push on through it.
When we saw boulders the size of small cars bounding down the sides of these gorges, I'll be honest, we almost turned around a few times, but every time we went for it. We ran the gauntlet.
Look at that one. A massive boulder going. What if we're in front of that when it goes? Just had to push on through the landslide. It was a bit muddy. Lost a flip-flop, found it again. It was quite frightening actually. Adrenaline's still pumping.
They had been lucky, but how long would their luck hold out?
We've just come to the end of the road, and we look down here and it's been completely washed away by the river. All these guys carrying baskets, so this man here and this guy here, they're all hopefully going to
carry our panniers to safety. We've just got to climb up around this cliff, but we cross a couple of people's property, so we're going to have to pay them. We've got to pay these guys as well. But if we get across safely, then I suppose it's going to be money worth it, because the only other option is to pedal all the way back, up over the mountain, and don't really fancy doing that. I don't even know if you can do that.
Still right in the danger zone. I think we'd better get out of here. We're still right in the dangerous patch.
No, there's a huge big crack that's just formed behind you.
Did that just form?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get out of here. Come on.
Prior to entering this area of Xi'an, we knew how dangerous it was going to be. It's been the site of some really horrific earthquakes and floods. Just over the top of the corn field here, just here you can see where the road, that's just one of the many road slides that's happened. And you can see just above it, the people, that's the path that you have to take to get around it. We're hoping to get across before the weather comes down, because it looks like rain could be on its way, and if it does, then everything's going to become incredibly unstable. Made it through. It was a bit of a trial. At times the slope being completely washed away. It was just mud and dust, and it was completely loose. And they're slipping underfoot, and the bike just wanted to go down into the river as well. Hopefully we won't come across that again. That's really nasty. But we've made it safe and sound. But as you can see, the road has still subsided loads here as well. People are going back and forth. I don't think the road's going to hold much longer though. It looks like there could be rain on the way. So ideally we're going to get out of this valley as quick as possible, because there's been so many rock slides throughout the day, yesterday, throughout the last week actually. So hopefully we'll get out of this area and somewhere a little bit safer.
They continued through terrifying tunnels, which seemed to cut through entire mountains. Fitter than they had ever been before, having ridden most of China in the altitude sickness zone. Mountain passes in excess of 12,000 feet were no longer obstacles. Their odometers read 4,200 miles. Sometimes they turned their minds to what their friends and family would be doing back at home. Taking the dog for a walk, going to the pub, watching a film before bed. Ben and Jamie had almost forgotten what it was like to be in their comfort zone.
We started to long for Thailand and the beaches down there and the backpacker trail where we knew we'd find English-speaking people. And we'd been in China for so long. But on the verge of that, Jamie had a problem with his foot, and we didn't know what it was. We thought it might be tendonitis. But we got stuck in a town in the middle of nowhere for a couple of weeks.
Do I need to see the foot doctor so he can tell me what he thinks, if it's getting better? How many? You feel better? It does feel better, but how many more days do I need to rest, do you think?
The mystery of Jamie's affliction was never solved, and the foot continued to cause problems. So they were forced to rest it again in the provincial city of Kunming.
We never really got an answer on what was wrong with my foot, and the last thing we wanted was to be stuck for weeks or longer in Kunming. So we tried to push forward a small bit at a time, sometimes by bike and sometimes by bus when I couldn't stand the pain. This is amazing. Nomad. It's language.
It was a frustrating time, but eventually they made it into Laos, And when Jamie's foot finally got back to normal, there was nothing to come between them and Singapore, where they hoped to find a ship to Australia.
In the end, we spent about 3 months in Thailand. Ironically, it was there that Ben had the worst accident of the entire trip.
I'd been at this bar that was on the top of a mountain for some stupid reason, and I decided to leave the bar and walk down the mountain in the dark.
A little bit later on, I was going down the mountain as well. And really, it was just out of luck that I found Ben. The moon came out from behind a cloud, I remember it very well. And I saw, just out of the corner of my eye, this lump lying in the ditch beside me. And it had blonde hair, it had this blonde mop, and there was this dark patch around the head. And I saw there was a person, and I didn't really see that it was Ben straight away, so I put my bike down, went over. Then I saw it was Ben, and I went absolutely hysterical. I was screaming at him, I was shaking him, I couldn't revive him. There was blood all down the side of his face.
Jamie was in an absolute state. He was shaking me, shouting, screaming, and I think that at that point he thought that I was dead.
I dragged him into the road, and at that point he seemed to come around, and luckily I was able to take him to a hospital.
I've got a couple of stitches here. I've got a nasty black eye. Sure it hurts. Cuts on my ear. Cuts on my face all over the place. And I just fell over. Shit happens. I suppose this is it then, just about.
Over the next few weeks, Ben got a lot better, and we had washed that monotony out of the system that had built up in China, and we were both really raring to go again.
In Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, a stone's throw from Singapore, they were running out of land, and the ever-present concern, which they had for so long put to the back of their minds, how would they find a ship, was no longer so easy to ignore. Funds were also running low, and they estimated they had enough cash left to last them no more than a couple of weeks.
Generally, the drivers are pretty courteous here, and they all speak pretty good English as well, so they can tell you if they're pissed off or not. But they all tend to give you a bit of room.
Having traveled 5,400 miles on their trusty bikes, Ben and Jamie were hardened to motorways and trucks, and were as always quite oblivious to the danger which constantly brushed their elbows.
Cycling in 32-degree heat at the moment, and it's not very pleasant. We're just sweating as usual, and not far at all from Singapore, but it's absolutely mind-numbingly hot. We've just been cruising at about 18 miles an hour, not using much energy at all. And now that we're heading into the wind, it'll probably take our speed down by about 10 miles an hour, so it's much better to have the wind behind me. Isn't that right? Yeah. Better to have the wind behind. Done 45 miles today, cruising now because I'm filming at about 11 miles an hour. So thankfully the sun's gone in now, so got a bit of shade, which is always nice. Oh, some competition. And put the camera back in its special camera place. Ooh, what's this? Something tasty. Hello.
One of the things you've got to remember is you've got to eat the local food because there's nothing else out there. When you're coming down those very remote roads, you haven't got any option but to eat what's on offer at the side of those roads. And you never really know what you're going to get. You never quite know what it's going to do to your insides.
Is it sweet?
Yes.
Ah.
Sweet. One is sardine roll.
Sardine roll.
Sardine roll. One is curry puff.
Curry puff.
Yeah.
What are you going to go for, Jamie? The curry puff?
Curry puff. Then Felicia say curry
Maybe the
puff.
sardine roll. It's very good. It's very sweet. It's got a sweet base and a sticky rice. On top we have a nice covering of brown sugar. It's been lightly pressed under a moderate oven and it tastes superb.
Sri muka.
Sari muka. Green coconutty thing.
What is
It's
that?
not what I was expecting.
It wasn't just the food that tended to go off in the tropical heat, it was actually our clothes as well, because we couldn't dry them out. I mean, they would just get covered in this horrible mould. So I was mouldy, Jamie was mouldy, and then the old mechanical problems started up again.
The worst time for a setback is at the end of a long day.
There's just a massive hiss. I think I got a wire or something stuck in the wheel. There's no spokes broken or anything, but the tyre just went flat in seconds. What have you got? Just a bit of wire stuck in there. Little bastard. Right, remember where that was.
Irritations like punctures were the last thing they needed when tired and hungry. Ben picked this one up conveniently close to a roadside food stall. However, when the boys saw what was being offered, they opted to hold out until the next place. Finding outposts of the Western world was always appreciated. And when they chanced upon one, they often indulged. They had reached the end of the road, but the elation of arriving in Singapore was marred by the fact that this destination could also mean the end of the adventure.
We didn't know what we were going to do at that stage because we were just about out of money. And, you know, you're out of cash, you're in Singapore, and you know you've got to find a ship to Australia. Imagine someone comes up to you and says, right, find a ship to Australia. What do you do in that instance? So the first thing we did was go down to the river taxi rank down at the docks, and I came across a guy and I said, excuse me, can you tell me how I can find a ship to Australia? And the guy just looked at me and said, I'm sorry, we just go across the river. We tried literally everything. We went down to container ship offices, we asked if they could possibly help. They always said no. I mean, I'm not surprised because we were in these horribly mouldy clothes. And on top of that, we were actually asking for a ship for free, which was ridiculous.
One day we were feeling pretty down about the whole situation because really Free Wheels East hinged on this one matter of getting across oceans on cargo ships. And we went to a bar in Singapore, we'd had a few drinks, and we had a very, very fortuitous encounter with this chap who owned his own shipping company. And it turned out that he had done something very similar when he was younger and sort of took sympathy with us. He empathised with what we were trying to achieve.
After fruitless weeks of asking around the docks and with funds at rock bottom, that fortunate encounter with the man who worked in shipping eventually led to the amazing offer of a free passage to Dampier, Western Australia.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Princess Mary.
So they set sail for the Antipodes, their route taking them first back to Thailand, then east to Borneo through the Straits of Lombok and across the Indian Ocean to Dampier. With all the spare time they had aboard, they began to wonder what they might do to make ends meet when they arrived. The idea of trading freedom for money did not interest them, but they did need funds to continue to South America and home ultimately. After arriving in Dampier, the Princess Mary steamed on to Fremantle. From there, the cousins would need to get over to the East Coast to find a ship to Chile, and somehow they had to come by some money.
When we were in Perth, we met some friendly locals there. We were trying to get to the East Coast to Sydney or Melbourne, we really didn't know. And they helped us make up this sign because we wanted a hitchhike. We decided that was going to be the best way of getting over there. They took us to a truck stop where everyone fills up on petrol before they make their trip out across the Nullarbor. And we spent the entire day waiting for trucks coming to fill up with petrol, and when they did, the truckie would jump out and we would approach him and ask if we could maybe jump in the back of his vehicle and hitch a lift. Just towards the end of the day, after having no luck whatsoever, this really vast man steps out of his cab, and I think it was Ben who went up to him and asked if we could maybe have this ride. And straight away he said yes, that wouldn't be a problem. He wasn't very happy about us jumping in while he was waiting in the forecourt, so he asked us to meet him around the back of a warehouse, which we're a little bit apprehensive about because it was very dark and he was quite a menacing looking chap, but it all turned out very well.
The truckie was meant to be going to Sydney, and we've always been very open-minded in our way of travelling, and that usually means that we're quite spontaneous. But when we were halfway there, the truckie took a call on his CB which said, "Can you go to Melbourne instead of Sydney?" I don't think either of us knew then how significant that was going to be for us.
When we were in Mongolia, we were bouncing around in a jeep in the Gobi Desert. And we struck upon this idea of how we could make money. We really didn't want to work for someone else. We wanted to be working on our own terms as much as possible. And the best way we could see to do that was to print out these booklets. And we essentially took some lines and paragraphs out of our website and we put them into a 20-page booklet. It had a glossy front cover and it actually probably looked very smart. People were quite impressed with it, I think. We took the last of our money, because it really was just about the end of it by then, and ordered, I think, 20 booklets each, and we took them straight out onto the streets, and within 45 minutes, I think we'd sold the entire lot.
So this is it, Free Wheels East location for selling brochures, Brunswick Street. It's full of bohemians, people that are likely to buy our little book, and we'll try and give you some action today. We'll try and show you just what it's like to sell Free Wheels East.
Excuse me folks, sorry, my cousin here and I are cycling around the world on these bikes. We've just pedalled here from England. Just pedalled here from England? Not today. Excuse me guys, my cousin and I were cycling around the world. Going well so far. But, yeah, see you for me. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you later.
6 months later, they had sold over 10,000 copies, and they knew all the regulars at their bench on Brunswick Street.
The whole little book thing was phenomenal. We were staying in a youth hostel at the time, and we were bringing home about $700 a day.
We were getting $50 handouts. People were just saying, "Love what you're doing, here's a 50." And we were just over the moon. We couldn't believe our luck. People were just so supportive and kind.
As a result of selling these booklets on the streets, we made hundreds of friends, and we managed to stay in houses and basements and warehouses all over Melbourne, and no one would take any money from us. They just wanted to give us these spare rooms for absolutely nothing.
When not talking to people on the streets, Ben and Jamie were on the hunt for another ship. But hustling a lift across the world's biggest ocean was not easy, and over time they began to lose heart. So they tried a new approach.
We'd always planned to attempt to go to Antarctica from Chile, but one day I was actually looking through an atlas in Melbourne, and I saw that obviously Australia is not that far from Antarctica, and I wondered, could we go there from Australia?
Soon after that, they heard of a boat going to Antarctica for Christmas. Unbelievably, the owner agreed to take them, again for nothing, and they departed Adelaide on an ex-Norwegian spy vessel called Sarsen, through the roaring 40s, bound for the Australian East Antarctic. The boys were on their way to the end of the earth.
The seas outside are tremendous, about 5 meters. It's pretty scary actually, the ship's rocking quite a lot, and our cabin, which we've come to call the dungeon, is getting more and more claustrophobic. We've had to pull down a shutter over our window, or porthole, captain's orders, because there's a chance that we could hit an iceberg, and if we do and the iceberg hits the glass, then it'll only take 3 minutes for the entire cabin to fill up with water. So Jamie and I are both, as I say, feeling highly claustrophobic.
It was a frightening thing to be at the mercy of the notoriously treacherous Southern Ocean.
Is that what's been hitting us?
Oh shit. We're going over.
The seas were scary, and we were well out of range of any medical aid.
Nearly went over then.
I'd had my appendix out a couple of weeks before, and you shudder to think. Imagine if that had happened while I was at sea.
En route, they stopped at the isolated Macquarie Island, 900 miles southeast of Tasmania. It marked the halfway point to Antarctica and was home to over 1 million penguins.
How do you do this?
With difficulty.
Is that the right way? Grannies?
We were on our way to the ice. We were on Macquarie Island. And both of us were feeling really privileged. It was an amazing feeling to actually be there. And both of us by that stage were almost daring to believe that we could complete Free Wheels East and cycle on every continent.
When you first arrive on the beach and you realise that these animals are just not in the slightest bit scared of you, and you can walk right up to them. You could probably touch them if you wanted to, but they're almost as curious of you as you are of them. They'll come right up to you. And you saw how close we just got to those elephant seals. I mean, just incredible. And it does take your breath away.
Soon after leaving Macquarie Island, they came across the first brash ice. They were well on their way to the frozen continent.
What can you see?
Icebergs. It's the ice shelf.
Am I going to fall over? No. Oh my, it's snowing! Woo!
Look at the water!
It's just unbelievable. I've never seen anything quite like it before in my life. And it's breathtaking.
It's Christmas Day and it's snowing. My first ever white Christmas actually. We're actually going through a huge big ice field at the moment. Been going through it for an hour and all night long up on the bridge they were picking a course through this. We've gone a long way off our course. Doesn't look like we're going to be getting through to the glacier that we intended to. Whether we actually get to Commonwealth Bay even, that's in doubt as well. So we're playing it by ear.
After 6 more days on the high seas, they reached their destination.
Well, this is it. We're officially in Antarctica now. This is Cape Denison, the windiest place on Earth.
It's blowing force 10 gale. Got white caps all over the sea. In the background is our backdrop. We have a vastly impressive icescape. It stretches from one horizon to the other. We have icebergs. It's incredible.
On the first day, it was too windy to go ashore. We couldn't believe it. We were right there. We could see the ice, but the katabatic winds were blowing down off the polar plateau, and they were easily strong enough to flip a zodiac. So we had to wait.
There was a serious side to it. There was no guarantee at all that we were going to get to go ashore, and that was quite a worrying thought. But the next day, we woke up and there was sunshine and the winds had all abated. And we went up to the bridge and we got this amazing news. The captain said we were actually going to be able to go ashore. We were going to get to cycle in Antarctica.
So we're ready to go. We're just waiting for the tender now, which is being lowered as we speak. We've got the bikes just here, and we're just very excited because we're going to be riding on that over there, which is the Antarctic continent. And this is continent number 4. Unbelievable. Bikes from Brook Farm to Antarctica. Here we go, riding in Antarctica. Well, we've just tried cycling, but it's a bit like trying to cycle in sand and incredibly hard work, but we're up here now. Plan is to take the bikes up to the top of this hill where we're going to gun it down as fast as we can and see what happens.
platform down there, we're going to lower that, and then we're going to jump into the sea. It's absolutely freezing. Ben's petrified, and he's just psyching himself into us at the moment. Here he is.
I don't want to go in. I was feeling all cosy. I just had a beer, we watched Back to the Future, and then someone came in and said we've got to go for a swim.
Visiting Antarctica seemed to give the expedition the punch that it needed to convince another shipping company to let Jamie and Ben board the Ecuador, their second cargo ship, also at no cost, scheduled to steam across the Pacific to Chile. By then, they felt they could do anything, provided they asked enough people. One man at a port in New Zealand said that he had not heard of anyone hitching a ride on a container ship for 30 years. The arduous 42-day voyage played with their sanity. Nevertheless, the cousins disembarked safely and cycled straight into the Atacama Desert, a place where it rains just once every 50 years.
It looks like this desert extends from about 3,000 kilometers to the north. We're going at about 6 miles an hour. It's going to be a long trip. Got a bit of water with us. I got some nuts. Nuts are very important on these ones again. I think I can hear a puncture. Shit. Is it going flat? Oh, he's never had a puncture. 11,000 kilometers. And Jamie hasn't had one puncture. Come on then, go for it, sing it. Hello. We're cycling all day in 35-degree heat, and yesterday when we were in Tacna we decided to buy this lovely green sheet. It's doing a fantastic job keeping the sun off our heads as we take lunch. Olives and cheese.
They were close to heat stroke, and water stops were sometimes 70 miles apart. More often than not, the ride took them uphill, and the hot desert wind was forever blasting into their faces.
Absolutely knackered. How much water have you got left?
About 3/4 of good stock.
Do you reckon it's going to last?
How much have you got?
Half that.
We'll be all right.
They only answered to hunger and thirst. The road was their lifeblood, and each day it threw them a new surprise.
We were in Peru, and over the last few days of the desert riding, I'd started to get some quite severe headaches. And at the time, I just thought it was heat stroke.
Ben got into bed one day, and he just never got out again. It was obviously in a very bad way. He was rolling around in his bed, groaning and clearly in a lot of pain.
I was lying in bed with the curtains drawn because I couldn't look at any light. It hurt to look at light. Jamie had gone out to get in some provisions, and he'd also organised a doctor to come and see me. A doctor came along and he gave me a once-over. And it was then that he told me that I'd got meningitis. And I think if you're told that you've got something like meningitis in the middle of nowhere, you're nowhere near your friends and family, you do associate that with death, and you do think that perhaps you're never going to see your loved ones again.
Ben was slowly showing signs of improving, but not enough so we could get back on the bikes, and a doctor came out and confirmed that it really wouldn't be advisable for us to attempt any cycling for at least another 2 or 3 months. It was a bitter blow to us because we were desperate to keep moving. So what we did, we got on a bus and we went up to the north coast of Colombia.
On the coast, they boarded a tiny yacht going to Panama with a mad dog captain. But the engine broke, and drifting in the doldrums with very little food or water, it took 7 days to complete what should have been a 2-day voyage. Finally, they arrived in Panama, and with Ben back to normal, they were able to ride on through Central America.
We just left San Jose, but not the capital, so the funny thing is we're between the Costa Rican mini San Jose and the Brazilian capital, Brasilia, but obviously it's not. But I'm not looking forward to that because I think it's going to mean a lot of up, but hopefully some down first. What sort of state is your sweatiness?
Well, sweatiness is pretty much as bad as it ever was.
It's disgusting.
And it's all greasy as well because it's mixed in with sun cream. It's pretty disgusting. But that's what's rolling into your eyes the whole time. That's why we should have got sweatbands. It just rolls into the corners of your eyes and stings. And you can't see a thing.
Oh. Onward ho. Oh look, we've got a fellow cyclist. Buenas tardes. Bueno. It's become a mad rush to beat this storm which is coming down now. Well, we're not wet yet, but we're going to be. And obviously to also beat this road. We can't go very fast. I've got to catch up with Jamie, he's getting ahead. The road's got a tiny bit better, but it's a little bit more sand in between in the pebbles. Look at that storm, it's going to hit any minute. I've got a ball of ache at the base of my neck, it's hurting quite a lot, because you have to strain and brace for each bump. Oh, now I'm going to deep sand. Really need to change gear. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear.
Made it! We predicted we'd get here just as the rain was about to come down. We literally came around the corner, saw a radio mast, and the rain started coming down, so got a little bit wet, but we're okay.
Back in the Northern Hemisphere, the boys were in sight of North America. Everything was going well. As planned, they had ridden in 5 continents. It was only road which lay between them and the United States. Africa, on the other hand, required another ship, the last major obstacle between them and home. Onward they went, and food was ever important. They became addicted to ice cream.
No ice cream? Ice cream? No ice cream.
What's the Spanish for ice cream?
Ice cream.
Oh my goodness. Here is a very sick-looking parrot. Oh, he hasn't had much luck in life, has he? I think he could be on his last legs, Jamie.
Who's a pretty boy then? Hmm?
Thank God for phrase books.
Helado.
Oh, that's meant to be the best ice cream in the world.
Ah.
Is it? Well, oh dear. I think this one's melted. Can you look up the word for melted, Jim?
Helado meltado.
20.
I've got enough, haven't I?
In Central America, there was a massive shift in our attitude because we were running out of money again. And we knew that we had to start to think about getting home. So we got up to the state's border as quickly as we could and crossed into Texas at Eagle Pass.
Three days. This is the third one of cycling. We've been camping 2 nights in a row, and for some reason Texas is humid, really humid, and it's green, which I wasn't expecting at all, and it's just not stopped raining. And the humidity must be up in, I don't know what the humidity scale is, but it's disgusting, and we can't get away from the grease. So what better place to go to in the morning to get nice and clean and get that grease off. Scrubbing at the sink. A few people think you're a bit odd, but actually I'm not advocating McDonald's here, but it's only $2 for a sausage McMuffin meal. Unlimited coffee, and my God, are we in heaven? And it's air conditioned, and you can just get a little bit of respite. This is just what we needed. We've got a huge day ahead. There are no rest stops. There's just nothing on the road. There's no towns for about 60 miles. That means we've got to cycle straight through the heat of the day with nothing, no stop, nothing. We've just got to keep going until we find the next one of these.
Soon after crossing into the United States, the cousins reinitiated correspondence with their contacts in shipping. By this time, they were old hands at it, and in Corpus Christi, they were offered the pick of the fleet. But there was no way they could afford to ride through much of Africa, so a ship was chosen called Friedrichsburg, going to Casablanca, Morocco, via Jacksonville and Baltimore on the eastern seaboard. They expected to arrive home in England within a couple of months. It had been more than 2.5 years since they last saw their homeland, their family, friends, and all the things they used to know.
The Atlantic crossing took about 3 weeks, and when you're on a ship like that, there isn't a great deal to do. You're not allowed to work, obviously. So there's a cycle of things that you can do, which include pacing the deck and looking out to sea and watching DVDs and reading books and obviously eating and sleeping. But when that cycle has run its course and you've been repeating the cycle for weeks on end, you start to go a bit crazy.
This is a digital test. Are you working microphone?
Since we departed from America, I have turned my cabin into something of an artist's paradise. I've painted many pictures. I have drawn, I have scribbled. Watercolours, ink, pencil. You but name it and I've done it.
Can't make it anymore. That's what I do is. Hello! It's all gone so wrong in the last few days.
What the hell?
It's like all gone wrong.
When one is on the verge of completing a round-the-world expedition, in which which they visit every continent without using aeroplanes, a special ceremony, the Earth, has to be conducted.
So we're still probably about 1,000 miles away from Casablanca. The waves have picked up, the swell has gotten really quite big as well. Marek, one of the deckhands, just told us that there's a big storm blowing off the Azores. We've been changing our course here and there, trying to run away from these swells, but they seem to catch up with us wherever we go. It's just all a little bit concerning right at the end of the trip. The last thing we want is for anything to happen. We just we want to get away from danger and get it all finished. It's quite sad, really. Well, it's sad and exciting. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure. I always thought as this voyage went on, crossing the Atlantic, that all these emotions would kind of well up, and you realise, shit, we're near the end of the trip now. That's actually it, and what next, and where do we go from here, and what do we do, and the kind of questions which there aren't any quick answers to, but they just creep into your mind all the time, and especially at night time when the ship's pitching, rocking and rolling, the engine's cut out, and your mind is racing, and you start projecting forwards all the time, and asking yourself just really impossible questions, and you've got to try and tell yourself that you can't ask yourself these questions because there's no answers.
We'd had a lot of time to think about our arrival in Africa while we were at sea, and getting to Morocco was going to be one of the most poignant events of our lives, because that would be the moment that we achieved something that no one else had ever achieved before.
We'd forged this uninterrupted line around the world. We could get a pen and we could draw onto a map a line that touched every continent and never left the Earth's surface. It was like our opportunity to show the people of our generation that it really was possible, that if you wanted to, and if you believed it enough and you desired it enough, you could do this kind of adventure. You could do it all by yourself.
Before Jamie and Ben set out on Freewheels East, a lot of people thought the idea of their achieving what they had set out to do so long ago was preposterous. They did not really believe they would manage it, but they did. And when the bikes were lowered onto African soil, neither could quite take it in. The journey had been so full of these mind-blowing moments that, at the time, this one seemed no greater than any other. But of course, it was. This was the seventh and last of the world's great continents. They couldn't wait to see their families. Rumor had it that Jack was in the process of organizing an arrival party in Dover. The excitement of returning home was coupled with apprehension. How would Jamie or Ben ever understand the everyday world again? How would people receive them? How would they live without their bikes? More to the point, how would they live separate lives? As best friends who had been within a few feet of each other for so long, they were almost one person.
We got up quite early, didn't we?
At about 5 o'clock.
And we're in, where are we?
I don't know, we're headed towards Tangier though, aren't we?
So we're in Morocco.
Morocco, that's it. It's about 30 miles in that direction.
Oh dear. It's highway patrol. I think we must have done something wrong. Oh shit! I think there might be a dead body in the back of this car.
A pair of legs sticking out the back.
Yeah. Shit.
It's a pair of legs sticking out the back of this vehicle. Twitching, they're still alive.
Oh, okay. Bonjour. Wait, the motorway is not tourist for bicycle. It's not permitted.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
We agree, deal.
The last ever family pack. Strapping on of the satchel, the ceremonial moment of the satchel being
Last time.
added to the bicycle. Right, is that it?
That's everything.
You all done?
Yeah.
We were actually both quite nervous about going home because it was the end of everything being Free Wheels East and simple and all you have to do is ride your bike, and the beginning of we're going back to all the things that we went so dramatically out of our way to get away from.
It was weird though, because we've been on the road for such a long time that we were just looking forward to getting back and being in one place and doing something mundane for a while.
En arrivant au point de rassemblement, un gilet de sauvetage vous sera attribué et un membre de l'équipage vous donnera des informations.
Quite unbelievably, we've made it onto the ferry and we're going back to England. The feelings going through our minds are just, personally I just feel really, really weird. Just so strange. Just don't want to go. Don't want to go home. Don't want to do anything. Just want to go in the other direction. Horrible, horrible feeling. But looking forward to seeing the family, I suppose. But I feel quite emotional actually.
Our 90-year-old grandmother had said a prayer for us for every night of the whole trip, and our parents had sobbed down the phone to us when we spoke to them, and we knew how much pain we were causing.
But never, not once, during the entire trip, during all the time that we were planning it and all the time that we were away, did anyone say to us that we were being ridiculous, that we were being stupid, and that we should come home. And I think that's part of the reason we were able to continue and complete the trip. The family were there right from the beginning, and they took us down to Dover, and they were there to collect us as well.
If it hadn't been for our wonderfully free upbringing, if it hadn't been for our family who supported us the whole way, every pedal, if it hadn't been for the people in Melbourne who bought the books and the people we met on our journey, then, quite frankly, we wouldn't have completed our mission, and it's to those people that we owe everything.
White Cliffs at Dover.
They had cycled over 8,000 miles, visited 33 countries, and ridden their bikes on every continent without using airplanes. Neither will ever know how or why they had been blessed enough for it all to have happened to them. Their lives before Free Wheels East had provided just the right ingredients to throw them into a journey which will forever remain inexplicable to them. How they were lucky enough to complete it, they will never know. They could well have ended up destitute, outcasts of society. But Ben and Jamie took a gamble and decided to do what they wanted to do.
Hello!
Okay, everyone, ready, smile, cheers!
I did it without a puncture!
Jamie, I can't believe
I didn't get a puncture! No punctures!
The bike, I want to get the bike in, so if you can stand behind the bike.
Ben, how many punctures did you have?
500.